Demand order. Okay. Should I sit? Looks like I'm at the top of the screen otherwise. Okay, let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, as we come here tonight on this evening, we acknowledge you as our good and gracious God, our Creator, our Savior, Redeemer, and Sustainer, Lord, one who knows the end from the beginning and establishes the end from the beginning. And you know us perfectly, Lord. For a word is on our tongues, you know it completely. So I ask your blessing on our evening this evening, on Jeffrey as he teaches us through these last week or two of our course in this, we'll say, semester, and also for us in the class, his students. Lord, just teach us, open our hearts to what we should hear from Jeffrey's teaching, and we just ask that you would use what we learn here to be effective Christians in our churches and out in our culture as well, Lord. I pray for your blessing on all of our evening. May everything be pleasing and acceptable in your sight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Millie and Paul. And a lot of our teaching this evening will be done by Scott Davis, who will be providing us with a PowerPoint presentation on chapter 7 in the Benedict option. And very much looking forward to that. Good to see those of you who are joining us online as well. Now, many of you are probably avid fans of the Babylon Bee, and most every week they have at least 2 or 3 articles that are certainly worthy of comment. Typically, though, we have so much to cover that we rarely ever access any of those, but there were a couple of articles in particular that I wanted to draw your attention to that's appeared on the Babylon Bee in the last couple of weeks. And one caught my eye. Biden recounts the time he parted the Red Sea to escape slavery in Mexico. And so you won't want to miss that. Sounds like a very important historical event. And then another one, I think this appeared, actually a couple of months ago, that resurfaced, is 9 reasons, and this goes to something that Millie said in reference to the article, why do churches refuse to address politics? And I think we all know how very, very important politics is. It's not the most important thing, but it's nonetheless extremely valuable because it directly impacts the quality of people's lives. And if we truly love other people, then obviously we have to be very attentive to the kind of laws and all that they live under and so on. But anyway, here's a Babylon Bee article, 9 reasons why Christians should never vote. Okay. There's been a lot of debate about Christians being involved in politics and the role that their faith should play in voting and policy making, but no one is asking the really important question, should Christians even vote at all? Okay, the Babylon Bee has put together the following list of reasons why a Christian should never vote. Number 1, separation of church and state. If Christians are the church, they have to be separated from the state. Wow, how could you possibly refute that logic? Number 2, there's no record in the Bible of Jesus ever voting. Number 3, another one, you might, if you vote, you might be referred to as a Christian nationalist. Okay, here's another one, voting for a flawed human being will completely destroy your witness. If a candidate posts means things on social media, a Christian cannot vote for him. That's somewhere in the Bible. Okay, I think it's kind of near the back or something. Here's another one. The 15 minutes that you spend voting could have been spent handing out gospel tracts. Another reason, there's no voting in a theocracy. Your only leader is God. Okay. Another point, you should just be washing the feet of all those people who are in line to vote. And lastly, although it's hard to say leastly, considering all the previous arguments, the winners are all predestined anyway. Okay. All right. So if you claim to be a follower of Jesus and have voted, please pray for forgiveness and start minding your own business like you're supposed to. Okay. So 9 reasons Christians should never vote. Okay. Now, on a somewhat more serious vein, although nonetheless whimsical, here's another one that appeared in the Babylon Bee just a few days ago. Baby who is about to be aborted claims squatters' rights. This is a brilliant baby, by the way. In a brilliant last-minute move to avoid being painfully murdered by abortion doctors, a local baby has claimed, quote, squatters' rights indefinitely. Sources say the late-term abortion procedure was halted at the last minute as the baby confirmed via sign language over ultrasound that he had the right to remain in his mother's womb under Oregon law. So this comes out of Portland, Oregon. There's nothing we can do about it. The law's the law, said the beady-eyed abortionist, throwing up his hands. We can't dismember and crush this child until the legal system has done its work. That's very unfortunate. Article goes on to say that this has become a movement among preborn babies, taking advantage of the state's extremely liberal squatters' rights laws. At publishing time, thousands more babies were allowed to be born after they also claimed amnesty as undocumented migrants while emerging from the birth canal. So where there's a will, there's a way. And so a bit of good news. Now, many of you probably came across this article recently from the quote comedian Bill Maher. Now, over the last 20 or 30 years, however long he's been on television, I think we have invested maybe 85 seconds watching Bill Maher on TV. But this is Bill Maher on abortion. I noticed today that in Albert Mohler's daily brief, he addresses this issue. I haven't had a chance to listen to that yet. But this came up several days ago, and he was hosting, I guess, his regular television show. And he had on the show someone named Gillian Tett, who's a columnist for the Financial Times. And she made the comment, quote, "But the thing that's crazy is at a time when America is facing so many huge legitimate threats, when there's a huge tech revolution going on, when the economy is faced with all kinds of challenges, the idea that you're fighting an election around this issue," speaking of abortion, seems to be, you know, just strange, like back to the 19th century. So the right of human beings to live, not that important. We have other issues, economic issues, and other matters. So this is how Bill Maher responded. Like I said, she said, you know, this is really an unimportant issue. And Bill Maher responds, "Not if you're a believer that it's murder. You know, that's why I don't understand the 15-week thing. Or Trump's plan is this: let's leave it up to the states. You mean so killing babies is okay in some states if the majority of citizens in the state approve it. Marr goes on to say, I can respect the absolutist position. I can respect the absolutist position. I really can. I scold the left when they say, quote, oh, you know what? They just hate women. People who aren't pro-choice just hate women. He goes on to say, no, I don't think they hate women. They just made that up. The left just made that up. Anti-abortionists think it's murder, and it kind of is. Kind of is. Okay. It's pretty decisive, isn't it? I mean, it's either right or wrong. It's either killing or letting this person live. So he says it kind of is like murder, and I'm okay with that. I mean, there's 8 billion people in the world today. I'm sorry, but we just will not miss you.
Sounds like Bill Gates.
Yeah, yeah. That's my position on it. So in other words, who needs more babies? Who needs more human beings? We've got 8 million. We don't need any more.
How many?
8 billion.
8 billion. And here's a follow-up by somebody named Ruth Marcus in the Washington Post. And she's very left-wing. And she's on a panel on some TV show that I'm totally unfamiliar with. And this is what Ruth Marcus comments, quote, abortion is a gift. And this is an odd way to say it, but it keeps on giving politically for Democrats. It's an odd way to say it because obviously removing abortion rights from American women has affected many women's lives and has caused a lot of damage. Yeah, it causes a lot of damage to the fetus, right? To the unborn child. But she goes on to say, politically, for Democrats, this issue is their wildest dreams. So in other words, it's very, very popular, according to her, and she may be right. It's very, very popular, the Democratic position on abortion, and that is that abortion should be allowed all the way up to the point of birth. And there are those, of course, who argue that abortion or infanticide should be allowed even several weeks after birth, after the parents are satisfied with what came out. Otherwise, you know, human life is totally expendable. So this is, I can't imagine a more black and white moral issue, and that is what we as Christians regard as the sanctity of human life. And others see as just a matter of choice, and will allow these fetuses to be born and these little babies to live if it suits our agenda. Otherwise, we have every right to terminate their life. And that is largely the Democratic Party's position on this matter. Republicans are generally, not exclusively, but generally pro-life. So quite a stark contrast in these two political parties, which at least in some respects represent two totally different worldviews and two totally different value systems. Not that everyone in the Republican Party, you know, thinks the same, and there's undoubtedly some in the Democratic Party that don't toe the line on their view either. But I thought that Marr's comments and the follow-up by Ruth Marcus really kind of crystallized what's at stake here. And one of the cutting edge issues in what we call the culture war, which is really a moral and a spiritual war going on in America, as you know very well.
Mueller did a good job covering it. Plus a lot of other things going on as well.
Millie says that Albert Mueller in his daily brief this morning did a very good job covering the issue, along with a lot of other pertinent issues as well. And if you don't get that daily brief on a regular basis, I would highly recommend that you do so. It'll keep you pretty well informed on a lot of the cutting edge issues.
What is it called? The briefing?
The briefing. The briefing. You can go to albertmohler.com, and just subscribe to the briefing, and you'll get it in your email every week morning. Yeah, every weekday. No, it's MOHLER. LER. Yeah. One comment here real quickly, and then we'll move on. And this comes from Janet Verba, and she wants to know, can someone spell his name? Yes, it's Albert Mohler, MOHLER. Okay. All right. Well, again, good to see you all. And we just have tonight and next week, so we'll cover as much ground as possible. I wanted to make some preliminary comments, and then I'd like to turn things over to Scott. He's put together a very excellent PowerPoint presentation on chapter 7 in Rod Dreher's book, The Benedict Option. But I'd like to go back and just emphasize a few points in some of the previous chapters. Going back to chapter 3, we kind of skipped over that so that Donna Weeks would have plenty of time last week to cover chapter 4. But if you go back in the outlines that I sent out, the chapter 3 entitled A Rule for Living, the thesis there of that chapter is that a life of faithful, holistic discipleship based on the traditional spiritual disciplines can profoundly transform our life and impact our society and culture. Now, what he's addressing in this chapter is something that's largely ignored in evangelical churches. That's very unfortunate that that's the case, but that's the reality. And that is what we would refer to as the traditional spiritual disciplines. And so Dreher makes some very important comments in this regard. He tells us, for instance, that we as Christians are only trying to build a Christian way of life that stands as an island of sanctity and an island of stability amid the high tide of modernity. So in other words, we understand the whole culture is against us, and every aspect of the culture is against us. They want to keep us basically distracted and keep us uninformed regarding what ultimately and really matters in this life. And so he'll go on to say that right belief, in other words, what we call orthodoxy, correct belief is essential. But holding correct doctrines in your mind does you little good if your heart, which is the seat of your will, remains unconverted. That requires putting those right beliefs into action through right practice or orthopraxy. So he's trying to make the obvious point that, yes, orthodoxy, having the right beliefs about basic truths, biblical truths, is absolutely imperative, but so is orthopraxy, putting those beliefs into practice, which, as you know, I mean, that would be the central theme in the book of James, wouldn't it? The Epistle of James. The key, he says, is to cultivate a contemplative lifestyle devoted to the spiritual disciplines. And again, this is something that's just sadly missing in the evangelical tradition. And we do entire courses on contemplative Christian spirituality. And he emphasizes the need for solitude, just getting away from everybody and everything, from time to time, so that you can truly be alone with God and uninterrupted. Solitude, silence. I mean, we're just inundated, aren't we, with noise. think about our worship services. There is not 2 seconds of quiet in those worship services. Prayer. True prayer, he says, is simply being in God's presence. Contemplation, being able to meditate or contemplate the truths that God has for you. The tradition of what Catholics and Orthodox sometimes refer to as Lectio Divina, we would call it praying the scriptures. In other words, a lot of people will go through Psalms or Proverbs or some other book, maybe even Paul's epistles, and they will read very, very slowly and read prayerfully as they go along. In other words, praying the scriptures. And that's, again, the practice known as Lectio Divina. We need to make sure that our work glorifies God, that we set aside adequate time for quality study, learning, developing our mind, and deepening our understanding of our faith. Asceticism, self-denial for a higher cause, and an antidote, he says, to the poison of self-centeredness. Now, he's not talking about extreme asceticism, such as characterized some monastic movements throughout history, but the need for, again, disciplining oneself, fasting, and devoting, quality time to praying and all, and perhaps even, going without not only food, but maybe even technology for a day or two or something like that can be extremely beneficial. Worship is absolutely a necessary ingredient, as is service to others, and the desire for community. We need other people who are like-minded, who can help us grow and mature in our faith. And so those are oftentimes referred to, as I said, as the kind of historic, contemplative spiritual disciplines. And again, this is something that's emphasized in some Christian traditions, not very much at all in evangelicalism. Another point that came to mind in this chapter, and I lifted a sentence out of a book written by Tom Sine called The Mustard Seed Conspiracy from back in the 1970s, in which Tom Sine writes, quote, "Our only hope to realize significant change in ourselves, and certainly, corporate change as well, is to become part of a Christian community of loving relationships, not just superficial relationships, such as oftentimes the case, when you go to church with people, you might, be somewhat friendly and whatever, but as far as really intimately developing quality, in-depth relationships, Tom Sine would argue, and Rod Dreher would agree, that this is really imperative. Dreher says in this chapter, monks are well aware that they are not merely individuals who share living quarters with other individuals, but they are part of an organic whole, a spiritual family. And ideally, that's the kind of relationships we would want to develop, in our church life as well. And then he ends this chapter talking about the great urges of our time. And I would say that these really characterize great urges throughout probably human history. One is self-centeredness, egocentrism rather than God-centeredness. Hedonism, where we just crave stimulation and excitement and so on. We all know people that are, for instance, just absolute sports fanatics. So self-centeredness, hedonism, consumerism, just buying and buying, having this insatiable, lust for more and more stuff, and materialism. So chapter 3, and then we go on to chapter 4, and Donna did such a wonderful job with this last week. Again, just a few comments, and then I'm going to finish up my prefatory remarks here and let Scott come up. But in chapter 4, A New Kind of Christian Politics, Rod Dreher emphasizes that for the Christian, how we think and how we engage in politics should have everything to do with our Christian values and principles. So it's not just voting for your own economic benefit, which is the case with so many, even conservatives, okay? Economics, their standard of living, apparently is the top priority issue. Well, for Christians, that should not be the top priority issue. The great moral issues of our day instead should predominate. He says, for the Christians, how we think and engage in politics should have everything to do with our Christian values and principles. Party identity, he says, is strictly secondary. Well, I wish that were true, but there is a vast difference. So sad to say, there's a vast difference in these two political parties. Now, the Republican Party is far from being ideal, to say the least. But the party that's really implementing, conceiving and implementing and aggressively promoting all this immoral agenda, and not only immoral, but just irresponsible and insane agenda, that is the Democratic Party. And we have to be realistic about these things and think and vote, frankly, accordingly. So when Rod writes that party identity is strictly secondary, well, yeah, it's secondary to the great moral issues of our time. But again, these two parties are quite different. And then in the section, traditional politics, what can still be done, he briefly mentions Donald Trump in this chapter. Now, again, this book was written in 2017, so it's pretty old. But his question is, quote, is Donald Trump a co-belligerent in the culture war? In other words, by co-belligerent, he's using that term in the same sense that Francis Schaeffer used that term. And that is that we interact with an awful lot of people. We don't think exactly alike on every issue, but on some of the issues that matter most, yes, we are in agreement. So Schaeffer would say that we are co-belligerents with these people. In other words, we may not think exactly like they do, but we both understand the great threats to America and to, individual lives. And in that sense, we're on the same side when it comes to doing everything we can to fight that agenda. So again, the question is Donald Trump a co-belligerent of ours in the culture war? And Dreher, again, this is 7 years ago, writes that given his character or lack of such, Christians had best be careful how they express their support for him. On the other hand, what's the alternative? Okay. To use Francis Schaeffer's terminology, conservative Christians might find Trump to be a useful co-belligerent in opposition to immoral and insane liberal policies, but it's doubtful that we can be allies, quote, allies in the fullest sense of the term with him. We know that he holds beliefs, and again, look at his lifestyle in the past, that are drastically different from that of biblically centered Christians. Nonetheless, is he a co-belligerent? Well, yeah, his first administration indicated that generally speaking, he was very much of a co-belligerent on these great issues of our time. Regarding political involvement, Dreher does not call for withdrawal or disengagement from politics. Indeed, he says we're called to be a source of light and salt in society and to love our neighbors. And that requires that we be very much involved and concerned about our political culture. He says we should support religious freedom and actively oppose abortion, sex trafficking, and the radical LGBTQ agenda. Also, I would add that we should also support the rule of law regarding issues such as border security and illegal immigration. We should do everything possible to combat pornography. We should support the war against drugs and faith-based support faith-based rehabilitation programs. And I'll end with this and then turn things over to Scott here. In my book, American Crisis, I wrote, quote, "To change our culture, we must first change the culture in our churches. For the church to minister effectively in the midst of a morally confused and very dysfunctional society, it must exercise its prophetic role at the local level, which means it needs to speak out on these great issues of the day. For that to happen, it's essential that we restore the concept of the watchman as a vital component of the church's ministry." Millie was, I think, inspired several years ago to take on this ministry of a watchman. And I know you have a very wide circulation, very wide influence in terms of what you try to keep Christians informed about and engaged in. This is a crucial missing link between what the church currently is and what the church can be. Every church, regardless of its size, should have an organized group whose designated ministry is to survey the cultural landscape and report regularly on matters of particular significance to the congregation. Like the men of Issachar that we read about in 1 Chronicles chapter 12, who, quote, "understood their times," this requires men and women who are attuned to the issues of our day and who have the knowledge and the communication skills and the organizational ability to function as effective leaders in this vital area of service. So obviously, those of you in this class and those who join us regularly online, we care about what's going on in our nation. A nation that we are so privileged to have been born into. What percentage of the world population is privileged to live in America? What percentage? Do you know? Yeah, it's well under 5%. And so in many ways, America has been a unique nation in all of human history, far from perfect, obviously, but nonetheless, a unique nation, and so much we should be so grateful for this opportunity. But we're only here not just to satisfy, our basic impulses, but we're here to be a source of true light and love and hope and truth. And that's why God has granted us this privilege. We don't have to build a wall on the southern border to keep Americans in, do we? No, we do it so as to preserve the territorial integrity of the nation. And it's something that we need to take very, very seriously. All right, so some preliminary comments. And so Scott, very much looking forward to hearing your presentation this evening as you deal with chapter 7 in the book. So thank you, and come on up.
All right,
and
thank you. See if I can do the technology part.
yeah, you'll need a special manifestation of God's grace.
Indeed. There we go. Okay, wonderful. I think maybe we're on the right track. All right, well, I wanted to thank Jeffrey. It's very gracious to, he hasn't known me very long and he's allowed me to come and speak to you all, so I really appreciate that. I appreciate all of you, and I'm very thankful that we found you. We feel very much at home here with you all. And just looking forward to continuing our study tonight. So chapter 7 is on education as Christian formation. So I believe
I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt. The computer is covering up your face, in front of you, the laptop in front of you. Yeah, there you go.
How's that?
Much better.
Right.
Can you see it?
I can still see it. So the way Jeffrey set this up, it looks like he's giving me the rest of it. I don't. So we'll just tackle chapter 7. There's too much information here to take on and get this all done, I guess, in the whole book. So what I've got here in chapter 7 is divided up into 10 different sections. And so we're just gonna, this is just an overview to give you an idea of where we're headed in chapter 7 tonight. So we're going to take each one of these in sequence. So the first part is education as Christian formation, and there's an intro here that Dreher's got. And so he's talking about monasticism, as Jeffrey was speaking about. And often I think we think of monasticism as seclusion. You know, maybe your first thought is the monks drew themselves away and they were secluded from the world, and that's bad and they shouldn't have done that. But really, in the minds of monks, I think it's more accurate to say that they were on a quest for God. And in order to do that, they had to withdraw and separate themselves. And Dreher makes this point in this first section here. The monasticism was this idea of being on a quest for God. And so it required this seclusion in order for them to then come back in to society and make an impact. So part of this preservation revolved around the preservation of classical learning, what was true and what was beautiful wherever they found it. And so that raises the question, what is truth, really? Which I think is a very important subject for us to tackle. And there's a lot of different theories on what truth is, but I think the best theory, we boil it down to it, is the correspondence theory of truth, which would state something along these lines. Our thoughts or ideas as they compare to reality, or as they align with reality. So that's a good definition to have for truth. And another piece of this here that Dreher speaks about in this section, he talks about two things, and maybe we should define these a little better. He talks about the disenchanted world and liquid modernity. The disenchanted world, he picks this back up from an earlier chapter in the book, but disenchanted world has reference to the medieval scholastic idea of metaphysical realism, in which God was understood to be immediately present with us. And we don't really even realize, I think, how different we think about things as compared to the medievals in this scholastic period, because we have gone through the Enlightenment and we've gone through all these different movements that have, and the revolution of science that has shaped how we think about things. But in the medieval period, they very much understood God to be very, very present with them in a way that I don't think we all always do. And so I think what that refers to, we live in the disenchanted world. Back then, they lived in an enchanted world where, and the idea is that God is there, whereas we have a distance. We feel like, no, it's not really God that's doing this in nature. It's just the sequence of nature, you know, that's happening. And we don't link it immediately with God. So it's a very different thought process from the medievals. The other idea here is liquid modernity, which is just this fast-paced society we live in where nothing is solid and truth is presented as always in flux. It's always changing. It's not solid. It's liquid. So just a couple of concepts there that Dreher points out that I think are important for us to kind of nail down. And then he goes on, well, this is the corrective. One corrective, he's going to talk a lot more about this throughout the chapter, is classical Christian education. So this idea of going back to the classics, to the Greeks really, and kind of melding that in with Christianity. The premise behind a classical Christian education is that there's a God-given unified structure to reality and that it is discoverable. So there's a structure to reality, and that there's the opportunity that we have to discover that, not define it so much or make it our own or make it what we want it to be, but it's really out there, and our role is to go out and discover it. So that's the premise behind the classical Christian education. We'll talk more about what that really means here in a bit as it progresses on. But I couldn't resist throwing this quote in here. I really like quotes, and this is one of my favorites. This is Pascal. Truth is so obscure in these times and falsehood so well established that unless you love the truth, you cannot know it. And he was speaking about 4 centuries ago, perhaps, but I think in our times it's very much the case, and perhaps even more so. It's very obscure. It's very hard to determine, and unless we love the truth, we can't know it. We're going to be misled. We're going to be confused about it. So as Christians, we certainly want to love the truth, and we have to love the truth if we're going to cut through all of the confusion to figure out where the truth really lies. So Dreher talks about, in another section here, give your family a rightly ordered education. And this kind of education allows the students a chance to get a sense of order, meaning, continuity. Dreher says this education integrates knowledge into a harmonious vision of the whole. So there's this idea that there is a whole basis underlying all of this education, and everything points to that, and we should focus on that. Every time we're talking about a particular part of education, we should keep in mind that it ultimately speaks to this ultimate underlying meaning, which is ultimately for us God as Christians. And he says it unites all things that are, were, and ever will be in God. So it's the same kind of concept. It integrates. It uses a lot of good words in this chapter that I like, and I'll highlight them a little more. But integrate, unite, these are important words to Dreher as he talks about Christian education. And I think this is something I just kind of added in, and maybe we could think about this, and you could tell me if I'm. I'll tell you what I mean by this, and maybe think about it or talk about it. But I think this requires a correct anthropology, and what I mean by that is, in order for us to be fully human, we have to be conformed to reality. The opposite of that would be, or the contrast to that would be, to have reality conform to whatever we want it to be. So as Christians, as we're doing Christian education, we have to come to grips and realize, I think we all intuitively realize, that there's a reality out there and we're just part of it. And so we're living into it, and that kind of defines who we are as human beings. Whereas it seems like in the liquid modernity, as Dreher would say it, what we have is we can make reality out to whatever we want it to be, and we can fit it into we can fit into whatever we want reality to be in however way we want, right? So it's a complete difference, and I think this anthropology idea of who we are as human beings is critical as a foundational component if we're going into to really understand how to do Christian education and get a lot out of it. So does that make sense? Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is a big thing in the Colson Fellows program, is they talk about that we have got to get our anthropology right in our culture right now. We don't have it right.
Yeah.
And Carl Truman's term for this is expressive individualism. Mm-hmm. Each person decides for themselves who they are. Yeah. Well, Jeffrey made the point early in the series here that unless we have a few things in agreement, we're going to really not be able to gain anything out of this. And so I think that's one of the things, correct anthropology of who we are as human beings is really important to
Scott, you mentioned correspondence theory.
Yes.
Can you give a definition of it, perhaps contrast it with something?
Well, I would say correspondence would be like I'm thinking something, and it has to align with reality. It's a thought and a reality of material creation over here on this side, and a thought on this side, and they align. Whereas I guess there's several different theories of truth, and we've studied them, and I can't remember them all now, but there's pragmatic theory of truth, like if it works, then that must be what's true. There's a coherence theory of truth, where you have within this box a whole bunch of things, and if they all align, they cohere together. So for example, coherence theory would be in our culture today, if everything aligns with LGBTQ issues, if we can all make sense of just that box of LGBTQ, then that would be coherence. It would all fit together. The problem is there's a whole greater reality beyond that.
A friend of the Areopagus, Dr. Richard Howe, who was a provost and professor at Southern Evangelical Seminary, he has a bunch of talks on YouTube, and I would recommend any of them on YouTube that you find that have the theme of how philosophy helps your theology. The shortest one, and possibly the best, is if you just go to the YouTube search engine and type Richard Howe, Howe, and SALT 14, that was the name of the conference he was at, and that one's only 41 minutes or so. But anyway, on the correspondence of truth, correspondence theory of truth, Richard always brings out Aristotle's quote to your question, Chuck, which is, quote, "To say of what is that it is not, or of what is not that it is false, while to say of what is that it is, and of what is not that it is not, is true."
Right.
Which is pretty straightforward.
Clear as mud.
It's really not. It's really, he says it wordy, but it's really not. It's just what we think is like, what we think and what reality is align. If they align, then we're doing the correspondence theory of truth. It's a thought and it's reality or material existence. If those two combine, they connect.
Richard,
Aristotle just has to say it that way because he's an intelligent Greek. But yeah, okay, so correct anthropology, I think, is a critical component here for this. I've got a message from President Biden for us here that relates to this.
don't.
Don't, that's another one for you.
But we did.
We choose truth over facts is what the President Biden has been quoted as saying. And in relation to this discussion, there's a couple of problems here, I think. One is truth over facts apparently supposes that some facts are false, which I think is really problematic. I'll step back and I'll say this. I think he may mean, I'm trying to figure out what he means by this. And I want to give him, I'll do my best to give him the benefit of the doubt here.
He's not a great thinker.
Trying to bring reason to an irrational mind is not a good use of your time.
All right, well, perhaps. If this means anything, it may mean that his side is not just about amassing facts, but rather about assenting to a worldview that makes sense of at least some facts. That might be about what he's aiming for. Well, like I said, I do believe there are a couple of problems here. One being that, this idea of some facts being false, I think is troubling, right? As well as the truth he chooses just doesn't correspond to reality, which is what the whole definition of correspondence theory of truth is. So a couple of issues there. There's probably more problems with that statement, but we may not have time to delve into that or desire to delve in further, but we'll move on. What else?
The difference between political science and physical science.
I say again now?
I think he's looking at the difference between political science and physical science.
Okay, can you elaborate?
Political science is whatever you want it to be,
Mm,
whatever you want to believe right now.
right.
Physical science is what is.
That could be, and that leaves him a lot of leeway for maneuvering around, right? Which is, I think, what he's aiming for. What else in this section? What Dreher makes a big point here. We should be passing on Western culture, which I think is very is open to critique in our culture today for sure. Anything related to Western culture typically considered to be racist today. But Dreher's pretty emphatic about this. We should be passing on Western culture. And in alignment with that, using examples of great men, especially in difficult circumstances. And I'm adding a little bit here. I think to highlight the virtue of courage, if we go back and try to find great men in difficult situations and how they persevered through those. Of course, again, you know, the current situation is to malign the great men of the past and bring them down to another level and then dismiss them entirely. So we're up against challenges here, but if we can go back to this model, I think it is very helpful. And the virtue of courage is, of course, extremely important, and we need to pass that on to our children as well. And this,
Well, you know, our culture, exporting our culture. So much of our culture now is pornography, violence, and movies that, you know, depict violence. I mean, so much of our culture that we export is pretty negative.
indeed,
I mean, they're great men, yes, but are they portrayed throughout the nations?
well, I mean, what is American culture? To my mind, it goes back to the colonial period and, you know, a couple
Yes.
centuries ago. Today, American culture is, you know, been redefined. So, you know, when I speak about American culture, Western culture, we're thinking we're going back centuries. We're trying to look at the great men of the past, and I think that's what Dreher is speaking about as well.
But that is not getting out today.
No, definitely not, and that's part of our problem, I think, and Dreher would agree. He speaks about a rigorous intellectual Christian faith, not a protective shell, and I think this is very, very important. Just from the fact that I've heard this, I've been a pastor before, and I've heard this from people in church. We shouldn't teach our kids too much. We should just kind of keep them secluded over here, you know, and keep them shielded from all this bad stuff. That's a protective shell. That they're going to go out into the world and they're going to be exposed to this eventually, and they're going to be defenseless if we don't give them, if we don't teach them while we have them. So a rigorous intellectual Christian faith is far superior to a protective shell, and Dreher would make that point as well. So I wanted to try to see if we could pull this off here. One of the things that Dreher points out is reading and writing was critical to monastic life. We don't think about this. We think amongst just, you know, doing a lot of prayer, maybe going off and just being in silence and solitude. They did a lot of that, but they did a lot of cultural preservation. In fact, they saved a tremendous amount of culture that would have been lost in the medieval period. And to do that, they had to be good at reading, and they excelled at this, and they had to excel at writing. And I think it's critical for students in classical Christian education is very good at this, I believe. I've got a student that we teach at Tacoma Falls College, and I had her come back and email me this week and asked her what, she was in a classical Christian school, and she's a college student now. And I said, what did you gain out of this classical Christian education? And she said writing was a big, big piece of it for her. She developed a skill for writing. And so I think it's just a critical piece. And I just thought this would be good. We went to see Jordan Peterson a while back, and I'm just really impressed with this man. I don't, you know, he's a phenomenal thinker. And I think he, again, you know, nobody aligns completely with us in every aspect, but this is good. And I think it's helpful for writing. I think it's helpful for students. I think it'd be helpful for us as well. So let's give this a run here. This is about 2 minutes. Let's see if this works. Gotta have some volume. How do we do that?
It's going to be hard to do because
Here we go.
you have to choose.
You know how things are.
Is that gonna work? Hope so.
Okay, so when you share the screen, there's a small block box that you can click that says share sound. You're gonna have to stop screen share. Now, when you do share screen, there's two little boxes there. One says optimize for screen sharing and one says share sound. Do you see them?
He's also muted.
I know, they should be muted. That doesn't affect the screen sharing.
Unmute, please. Yeah,
How's that?
that's it. Thanks.
Okay, sorry. Technology. Okay, so all I was saying with that was now I've got an echo.
Yeah, you need to mute the other computer.
Is that it?
I'm sorry, not mute it, but turn the sound off on the other computer.
Now we're working on that. Okay. Nope. All right. Well, we'll try to continue on.
Everybody memorize and sign it. Okay. Hopefully they'll all be there still.
Technology is a wonderful thing.
Progress.
Yeah, when you're the master. of
Yes.
those.
Okay.
Okay, are we back yet? I've got the echo and I can just deal with it. How about
No,
that?
it's them that can't understand you. Turn off the mic on yours.
What does that mean?
So it's not the mic, you need to turn the speakers off on one of the
Is that-
computers.
No,
Speaker. There.
that's what I had before. Stop.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Still got an echo. How do you turn the speaker off on this? Do you know?
I mean, that's all I know. Right there.
Okay, that's good.
That's what I had before.
Okay, he's off.
Where's this? Can you stop sharing for a minute?
Mm,
Can you, because I think you need to stop sharing.
Okay.
And then you go down here. I'm not gonna stop it, don't worry.
Mute here. Mute that there.
I'm really bothered at home with my Sling TV. Anybody know anything about Sling?
Can you test it now?
What do we got now? Still an echo.
See the speaker right here?
Yeah.
Switch to phone. Leave computer audio.
Yeah, he should,
Can you leave computer audio?
well. Okay, I don't know if your speaker is
Yeah, I don't know
on.
which one of them is.
This is a PC?
Goodness gracious.
Okay.
Hmm.
It's one of them. If you leave computer audio, as long as one of them is still on, you can leave this audio. So,
There.
but he did that before.
And you're not using this, correct?
Okay,
No, so it can use his speaker? No,
If
you
it-
want to
if
use
it
his
echoes.
mic, but not his speaker.
I think it's still echoing.
Hello? Okay. Speaker, you don't want to use the speaker. You want to turn that off. So how do I turn that speaker
Audio,
off?
go to audio settings, maybe right here, see audio settings down here. Output level, output volume. Can you turn it,
So the microphone will be on.
but the speaker's right here.
How do I turn that off? That should be off.
Use separate audio device to play.
You don't want to, you want to just disable it.
Why is this computer on?
Chris
One of-
is controlling the link to the,
So he couldn't do a.
we were all fine before that.
It was the
video.
exactly. That's right.
turn your speaker off.
Can you not?
Oh,
No, this is exasperating, isn't it?
It seems the speaker is off on his machine, so it has to be on that machine.
Yeah, so how do you? So, let's bring up your Zoom meeting here.
That presumably is the volume, but it's not.
That's the
Is that
mic, it may not be the
Let's
speaker.
Go in here. Audio settings, right here. Go. Oops.
Yeah.
Try it.
All the way down.
Isn't it all the way down?
No,
Looks
I
like it.
guess so, try it.
Try it.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
that's better. Test, test. Okay, where's my? Oh, man, so which
Go
one?
back
This
to
is-
the unmute on this.
I don't know.
Yeah, go back here. Here, let's go to settings.
Take down the share screen.
Can we,
Yeah, unshare. I don't know how to take that. I don't know, guys.
no, no. Where's the, you have to go back to the Zoom,
Yeah,
the,
he's got a share screen up, you have to close that down.
Right there.
this one. I'm trying to get out of settings.
I wouldn't worry about settings.
Okay,
Just
so right here,
that share screen.
this one? I don't know how to close this one.
Use that button there.
Oh, it's a Mac.
Okay,
Let's go back to this. There we go. Now let's bring this one.
oh,
Now we gotta bring,
now
click
you
this,
can
click
minimize
this.
that.
Yeah, I don't know Mac. Can I close it?
Yeah,
And then here, right here. He's not muted.
well, I don't know what speakers.
Oh. This one?
Yeah.
Here now?
Try
Okay.
that.
Well,
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
so can I go back to PowerPoint?
I don't know if they can hear you,
Can
but
you,
your microphone is.
Should I go
working.
share screen?
Yeah, share screen.
can they hear?
I'm gonna try this.
Yep, there you
All
go.
right, we're gonna go on from
But I don't know
this.
if they can hear him. No.
But you also have to shut down that,
Oh, this one? This one?
yeah.
But no one's saying if they can hear you or not.
All right, I don't know about that. I guess I'll just have to continue and we'll, okay? So maybe the lesson to learn that Dreher didn't put in the book was be sparing with technology. Because that caused a real issue. So, okay, we're going to carry on and I guess we'll work on getting the group back. So, chapter 3 or section 3 here was teach the children scripture. So, Dreher talks about that, creating an educational model that integrates Bible knowledge and meditation is the key. Again, this is going back to the monastic model, knowledge and meditation coming together. Scripture has the power to bind young Christians together. It must be taught in a high level, I would say. Just a superficial level of scripture is not going to be sufficient for the cultural challenges that we have going on these days. But it does have the power to bind people together, Christians together. And in fact, it's essential for that. And this will counteract moral therapeutic deism, which is another phrase that Dreher speaks about in the book, which I have really been able to see in my experience with college students, is that Christianity can oftentimes, in many cases, be reduced to kind of a moral kind of a therapy for students. Immerse the young in the history of Western civilization. And I just had a very brief anecdote here, an example of what we lost, what we have lost. The World War II generation fought for the survival of Western civilization, essentially. Subsequent generations, myself included, grew up respecting these men, deeply appreciating what they fought for, some more than others, obviously. But I think the current generation is indifferent to Western civilization at best and thinks it should be dismantled at worst. And there's a certain person I'm thinking of that I love very much, and she just kind of shrugs her shoulders, when we try to convey to her this this historical sequence. And so it's really disheartening to see that in the culture, and we've lost it. And this is cultural memory that has been rapidly been destroyed under the guise of racism and so on. Philip Reif in the book, Dreher's book here says, barbarians are people without cultural memory, on page 154. And this is N.T. Wright. I came across this idea years ago reading one of his books. He says 4 things worldviews provide us are stories, questions, symbols, and praxis. And when he put symbols in there, I thought, I don't really understand that. Symbols, they don't seem to be that as important as the others. But I've come to realize they are essential to cultural survival. And I just I did bring with me a copy of the complete LGBTQ calendar for 2024, all 36 celebrations. Some of these are months, some of them are weeks, some of them are days. 36. And so we're bombarded by these symbols in our culture today. And as you know, yeah, Visibility Day was the most recent. Well, maybe not the most recent. Visibility Day fell on Easter, so that was one of them. Let's see, in April, the next one coming up, well, we had the Day of Silence on the 12th. The next one coming up is International Lesbian Visibility Day. That's April 26th. So it goes on and on and on. You can come take a look at these if you'd like, or we can pass them around if you want to, Jeffrey. But symbols of the culture. Every time you look at Google, there's something there, and you can investigate that and you'll see it. But every totalitarian government, Dreher says, knows that controlling people's access to cultural memory was necessary to gaining dominion over them. And I've got Brave New World here as an example. And I'm going to just run through a few more quotations to just give you a flavor of what this has been like in history. So Karl Marx, take away the heritage of a people and they are easily destroyed. Vladimir Lenin, give me 4 years to teach children, and the seed I have sown will never be uprooted. America's like a body, and its resistance is threefold. It's patriotism, morality, and spiritual life. If we can undermine these 3 areas, America will collapse from within. Stalin. Education is a weapon whose effects depends upon one who holds it, and whose hands. I've got a problem here. I can't read it. And on who holds it in his hands and who it is aimed at. And then Khrushchev, a little later on, you Americans are so gullible, you won't accept communism outright, but we'll keep feeding you small doses. So, the great leaders of the Russians in the 20th century, probably the generation today doesn't even know who these people are, much less what they said, but we're familiar with them, hopefully. And then Dreher, they don't even know what they don't know, and they don't care. They're just talking about our generation, the generation today. So this is part of the great challenge, that we're faced with here. The proposed antidote from Dreher, students need to be taught about the negative aspects of totalitarianism and tyranny. Students need to be taught about the positives of human nature, rightly functioning under the rule of God. And we need to expose students to the ideas and help them come to conclusions using the Socratic method. That's part of the classical Christian education. Socratic method is just asking questions, asking good questions, and letting the students wrestle with it and figure it out for themselves. Dreher makes a big point of pulling your children out of public schools, toxic peer pressure, sexual promiscuity, normalization of transgenderism, LGBTQ stuff is just overwhelming. Parents need to be taught as well. They're uninformed and negatively affected. And so that's just about as big of a problem. And then salt and light is waning. And Dreher makes a comment, it's keeping your kid in public school today is, he says, comparable to tossing a child in a whitewater river in the hopes that she will save another drowning child. So really a tough situation. It goes on, number 6, don't kid yourself about Christian schools. We put our daughter and son to some degree through Christian schools. And so we have some experience with that. I think you can, I certainly see his point. There's a lot of peer pressure. There's a lot of the same kinds of things in Christian schools as there are in public schools, and a lot of issues there. And I resonate with this comment. The trite theological education many receive at Christian school will serve more as a vaccination against taking the faith seriously than an incentive for it. This all depends upon the child. It depends upon a lot of other factors. It depends upon the Christian school. I don't think you want to broad brush and say all Christian schools are that way, but I certainly see the point here. Yeah. So part of the solution, start classical Christian schools is Dreher's idea here. And this is linked to the Greco-Roman ideal of cultivating wisdom and virtue, plus a Christian worldview on top of that. So ancient Greeks melded with Christian worldview, I guess you could say. And the key thought here is not what I can do with this learning, which is what we've all grew up going to college for, to go get a good job. That's what I was told. But what will this learning do to me? You know, the university is originally the idea of figuring out why we have the unity and the diversity. That's where the word comes from. It's a meshing of those two. Well, we've lost all that. It's just go to college and get a good job. So this is going back to the original idea of university and education. And then he uses some of these words I was mentioning before: comprehensive, harmony, discovery, important words for education. The trivium, grammar in the grades 1 and 4 are just basic facts about the world. That's what you learn in the first 4 grades. Then you have logic, grades 5 through 8, using reason to analyze and discern meaning. So now you're wrestling with the basic facts. You've already got them. Now you're trying to fit them together. The last one is rhetoric, grades 9 and 12. Struggle. Yeah, you're probably just lamenting, right? Grades 9 through 12, abstract thinking, self-expression, poetry, how to convey what you learned to others at that point. So if you get that kind of high school education, you're well prepared for college. But my goodness, you know, where's that being taught today? Dreher says, speaks about a new monasticism that seeks to harmonize church, school, and family life for its students. Benedict option. And then I just thought of this quote from Bonhoeffer that so aligned with this. The restoration of the church will surely come, he says, only from a new type of monasticism, which has nothing in common with the old, but a complete lack of compromise in a life lived in accordance with the Sermon on the Mount in the discipleship of Christ. I think it's time to gather people to do this. And of course, he said this back in the 30s. So we're 100 years out almost. But what a wonderful quote here by this guy who was on the forefront of this same problem 100 years ago. And I think it's time to gather people to do this. And I believe this is what Jeffrey's heart is with the Areopagus. So again, I'm really thankful we found you guys. Bonhoeffer or Dreher says, we're preparing students for a church which does not exist yet as we do this. So it's a scary challenge to put them through this because the church doesn't even exist yet for what we're preparing them for. And a question for us, which we don't have time to discuss: why does the church seem to make advances in the culture only when it feels like it has nothing to lose? Why do we wait till we get to that point? And that's a thought I had from reading page 163 of the book. But we just wait and we delay until there's nothing else to lose, and then we make the change. Why do we do that? You know, as a church, we shouldn't be doing that. Classical Christian education. This is the website. Maybe that's a starting point. That's in the book as well. No classical Christian school, then homeschool. And Dreher, I think this is a big challenge for people going forward. I mean, considering financial issues, time challenges, just a really tough spot to be in to try to do that these days. But I think, you know, some of us probably coming up on being grandparents, I think if we work with our children to educate our grandchildren, we may have a chance to do some good as grandparents. But it's tough. And that's what the next chapter is it's a lot of hard work, I think, is chapter 8. So number 9 is I think this is an important component of university. an environment where they can learn to become themselves in the context of intentional Christian community. Labrie was an example of that, and Dreher gives a few examples: college campus living quarters, college campus ministries. Laura and I met at a Christian camp. That's where we got married. We learned to do ministry together there. Without that, we would never met each other. I mean, it's just so it's a real heart of ours to have this. That Christian camp doesn't exist anymore because the government came in and it took Christ out of it. So, you know, it's becoming more and more of a challenge, but two important components additionally to this: a Christian academic counterculture, and there's a ton of good resources out there today. I wish we could have more time to go over them, but that's crucial. Apologetics is crucial. Establishing a network for the purpose of finding work is also crucial, and Dreher makes these points. And I think also ensuring students have a good work ethic. That's something that's really in short supply, I think, coming up these days with students. Go back to the classics, Forward to the Future. I love this quote from page 174. When we discovered we could do one strange thing, we started to think about how many things we could do in an unconventional way. Once you step out and do one weird thing and it sort of works, then you maybe can have courage to keep going. And the practical challenges facing us are unlike anything most believers in this country have ever dealt with. I think that's very true, from page 175. And that's a whirlwind tour of chapter 7. I'm really sorry about the loss of the group. I think we did lose them. Yeah.
I want to talk about the work that the reason I got that phone call was because somebody didn't show up for work, so I get to go in early.
Yeah.
That's the new culture. Under 30, they don't show up. When they show up, they're late. And when they do show up for work, they look like a rag bag.
Yeah.
I'm ashamed that some of the people I work with.
It's
Yeah.
What sort of work? What
That's
sort of work do you do?
I work security.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm prior service.
Okay.
My dad's prior service too, so if I show up early, you just call me, can you come in early? Yeah, thank you very much. If you had a drill sergeant in your life, you wouldn't be late, believe me.
I would.
Can we go 10 more minutes? We've, the technical problems set us way behind. We also got kind of a late start.
We did.
So let's just go another 10 minutes.
Okay.
If that
If
works for you.
That works for me.
Okay.
I did want to, I did speak with the president of Tacoma Falls College. I work at Tacoma Falls College, and I spoke with the president this week because I said, hey, I'm doing this Areopagus. I'm telling him about Areopagus, trying to get him connected with Jeffrey. And I said, could I just do a Q&A with you and then share it with the group? And so I did that. And I have those forms here. I have about 30 of these. And so, yeah, we can pass them around. And y'all can take these home. This is from the president of Tacoma Falls College, me asking him these questions and then him responding. And so just wanted to briefly just go over the main points of what he said, and then y'all can take the whole thing home. But what's the biggest problem you see with Christian culture today? This is what I asked him. His main answer for this is Christian cultures confuse feeling with fact. So instead of have a factual Christian culture, we have a feeling Christian culture. And he would say that's the biggest problem. Of course, there's a ton of problems to choose from, but that would be his top one. What's the biggest challenge you feel comfortable sharing as president of Christian College today? He lists several major challenges, but mission drift is the one he highlights the most. So easy to get off track with mission. And I think that's true with church. I think it's true with just about any organization. It's so easy to lose your focus. So that would be that one. And then I asked for 3 action steps that Christians could take to advance Christian education in America. The first one involves apologetics. So our youth are just not getting a good apologetic foundation. And he cites the youth groups. I think it's true across the board, not just youth ministry, but home ministry, church ministry in general, education. I mean, apologetics is sorely lacking. And again, this is one thing I appreciate about Jeffrey in this ministry. I mean, it highlights apologetics so often.
God, can I make one
Yes,
comment? When we started the Areopagus 20 years ago, I really thought that apologetics would be thoroughly integrated into church culture and church education within just a few years. Because starting in the late 80s, early 90s, there was just an enormous amount of quality apologetics being written and so on. So here we are 20 years later, and it's virtually as marginalized today as it was 20 years ago. And it's not just that there's a generally unintellectual culture and climate in our churches, it's positively anti-intellectual. And it kind of goes back to the first point there about feelings and facts and so on. So it's been just inexplicable to me that there's been so much resistance to just basic Christian apologetics, being able to explain and defend why we believe that the Bible is the truth, revealed truth of God.
Yeah, inexplicable is a good word. It really is. Inability to focus, maybe the culture's taken that from people. You've got to be able to read and you've got to be able to write, I think, and think. And it's just Jeffrey's quote. I love it. Most people in church think that apologetics is a sideline issue for people that have nothing better to do than think. I'm going to remember that one. 3 action steps Christians should take. So that was the first. The second is, he says families should be selective of the Christian colleges they send their kids to. And the third one is that they should send them to Christian colleges. So that's Q&A with Dr. Bob. He's a wonderful man, and hopefully Jeffrey can.
What was his background?
Law enforcement, oddly enough. Yeah. So among other things,
probably first priority these days.
Yes.
How do you understand the Benedict option? New, shall we say, he calls it the new monasticism. How do you understand that and how he describes it? If you were to implement that, how would you implement it?
Gosh. Well, I think I think a piece of it is what we're doing now. I mean, I think it's this. I think it's coming together and maybe brainstorming a whole lot about how we're going to go forward. I think, as Bonhoeffer said, going back to the principles of Scripture, the Sermon on the Mount, he highlights there in the quote. What did Jesus teach us to do? I think it's going to take sacrifice, maybe on a level that none of us have, or many of us have not yet sacrificed to. I think it's going to take our minds engaged in a way that maybe they haven't been, and maybe not particularly us I'm speaking about, but just the Christian culture in general in America. Christians are going to have to start thinking. They're going to have to start being aware. They're going to have to start living like Christ called us to live. And it's going to take huge sacrifices, unfortunately, for us to ever get this back. And I don't think we're going to get it back in any time soon.
You know, Rod talked a lot and wrote a lot about countercultural Christianity. And of course, he had that small community of Orthodox belief in the Orthodox church there outside of Baton Rouge, which makes it all the more tragic when you look at how his life has worked out in the last several years. And so many of those values that he emphasized as being so absolutely crucial to have a strong Christian witness, and then to see his own family and community dissolved in so many regards. Very sad.
It's a new monasticism, though, Bonhoeffer would say, and I think we would have to agree. And I think technology is going to play a crucial role in that. And we see a huge problem with that tonight. But I think it has the ability to bind us together all across the nation, all across the world, if we can hold that somehow together, then we can stay connected that way. Yeah, Dan.
If anybody wants to pursue if anybody wants to pursue the question, I was asked to speak louder. If anybody wants to pursue the whole question of classical education, Christian education further, things like the trivium and the quadrivium. I don't know if Rod Dreher goes into this, but Dorothy Sayers, who was part of C.S. Lewis's circle, did a great talk called The Lost Tools of Learning. And you can find that online for free. Doug Wilson, who's kind of an individualistic sort of reformed pastor person out in Idaho, he wrote a book based on Dorothy Sayers' process called Recovering the Lost Tools of Learning. And either of those are very good, I would think. But the key part is tailoring the child's education to their mental interest at that age and stage. So some kids at certain ages, they like to memorize stuff, and that's when you give them 1492 and all the things. And then later, they want to, at some point, children want to argue with you and challenge you. And that's when you teach them the tools of logic and rhetoric.
Exactly.
So good arguments.
Yeah. And he mentions Sayers in chapter 7 too. Yeah, he does. And exactly what you said.
Scott, from Lori, that you all sort of do that at Tacoma.
Well,
No, that's at my elementary.
I was going to try to go back to Chuck's point. I think for us, as we think about maybe our children and our grandchildren coming up, I was thinking about this today. I think we're going to have to work with our kids and say, how much can I have these grandkids? How much can I pour into them? You know, and start thinking about how we're going to be able to do this. Like for young boys, they've got to be taught how to be a man. I mean, that's just neglected. How to be, what does that look like? Well, we can do that as grandparents, grandfathers, or, you know, how do girls become a woman? Same thing. You know, how, there's so many things, just skills on how to become fully a flourishing human being. I mean, I think, yeah, basic, you know, how to relate to the opposite sex. I was clueless for many years about that. How to do basic things with your hands. People don't have a clue, it seems to me today, in many cases.
I see that.
Yeah.
I know also, I teach in an elementary school and I am saddened by a lot of the books that the kids are reading. And some of the novels out there are just lame. They're just lame. And the Hillsdale College does a great job of listing the classics. And that is one very easy thing that we can do as grandparents or aunts, uncles, whatever, is look at that list, start reading those classics and have discussion. It's very easy to do. Discuss what's going on in the book. Very easy.
We have
a lot of them have movies made to them, so you can take it up another notch and say, okay, we're going to read, then we're going to watch the movie. Let's compare and contrast, and let's talk about that. I mean, anybody can do that, and it's not scary to the kids. It's not weird or anything like that. They want to read with you. So that's a very easy one step you could do right now as you walk out.
You got to find the very, very, very best resources. We don't have enough time in our lives to waste on inferior resources.
Other comments real quickly, before we close things out and do anyone on the chat? Oh, we actually have several comments here that came in via chat. Yeah, okay, I think most of those relate to the technical issues we were having. Okay, anything else? Yes.
Everything going on and all those negative things, just the resources that we have at this time. People who are thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about God out there. I know, I think a lot of Al Mohler, I don't agree with everything he says. I think about the Colson Fellows program and everyone who's involved there. There's a great grandparenting, the Legacy Coalition that gives you lots of resources along the lines of what you're talking about. So really, in this age, there are lots and lots of resources for us if we will. look and, I mean, reading material, World Magazine, and all the things that they're getting out every day, world opinions, based on what's happening. So yes, there's a lot of distractions, but we have a lot of resources.
Yeah, we truly have no excuse, do we? I mean, there's just an absolute wealth of great apologetical and cultural, scholarship and work out there available. Anything else? Well, again, my apologies for the technical issues, and I appreciate those of you in the class and also online who hung in there with us. Thank you very much. And I wish we'd had a little bit more time and that it had gone a little more smoothly, but excellent content. Thank you very much. And just in closing, what is it about Toccoa Falls College in particular that is unique or particularly inspiring?
Yes, well, in 1977, there was a flood at Toccoa Falls College. Some of you may have heard about this.
Yeah.
And a dam that had been built back in 1800 broke above the falls. And this caused a lake up there to come through the falls and down into the valley where I live right now. And at that time, there were trailers in this area, and I think 39 people were drowned and killed.
Mhm.
It was a huge disaster. President Rosalind Carter came. President Carter was president at that time, and she came to Toccoa, and it was just it was a national disaster, essentially. But it did put Toccoa Falls College on the map, and it allowed them to get national recognition through it. So God has used it, but that's the great event that happened there that's so memorable. And so it's very odd for us because we live in the exact spot where people experienced that flood back in the 70s. They never built the dam back. They never built the lake back, so it can't happen again.
So I guess you're very thankful that lightning doesn't strike twice in the same, exactly the same place. Okay.
We're very thankful to be there. It's a wonderful place to be, and God has graciously provided for us to be there. So,
Well, thank you all. And so next week will be our final week, our final session. So we'll try to cover as much as possible that remains in the book. So if you have any particular questions or comments you'd like to make regarding the book, write them down and bring them next week. And we'll try to redeem the time as effectively as possible and cover as much material. This is a great book, and I hope you're all reading along, or at least have read, in part. Rod Dreher is going to be at the Colson Conference, which is the end of May, early June, in Arlington, Texas. Living courageously.
I think there's going to be a debate. John Stone Street and Rod Dreher, is Christianity optimistic or pessimistic?
Well, it doesn't matter. The question is Christianity realistic? That's all that matters. Yeah, I would think so. They're both great thinkers. So.
I've heard you talk about take the Rod Dreher, Benedict option approach, but as the way some people see it, as opposed to, in contradistinction, the Abraham Kuyper view goes. I've heard him talk about. He's kind of like Ben a Kuyper, kind of merges the two.
Yeah, I'd have to kind of review my thoughts. I know Francis Schaeffer was sort of the counterpoint to Kuyper in many respects. So anyway, well, good being with you all. Thank you again. Those of you joining us online, wonderful to see you. Very inspiring to see you all show up and be involved in our course. So blessings on the rest of your week.
Thank you. Blessings on you too.